Nungaman Ladi, everybody. Lovely to be with you today. It's fantastic to see you joining. We will just, Aunty Munya, I'll just check that everyone can chat with us.
Yes, let's do that.
And you
To
can't
everyone?
at the moment.
Oh.
But now you can. So I'm just going to test it and put in Nungaman Ladi from us.
Yes.
And we'd love to hear from you in the chat. Hello, Jen. Lovely to hear from you in Ngunnawal country.
Yama, Jingari.
Awesome. So lovely to see you all, and such an important topic today, Aunty Munya, how to talk about the voice.
It certainly is.
I'm just going to get a sense of who we've met before, Aunty Munya.
Okay.
So if you do see that poll, if you could just respond to let us know if you've been part of one of these yarning circles before. And it's like playing a game, Aunty Munya, isn't it? Seeing those numbers of participants come up.
Yes.
And feel free to have chat amongst yourselves as we go. What is today about, Aunty Munya?
Well, it's how to talk about the voice.
A really important topic at the moment, and very much a bit of a moving feast. So today is a yarning circle. There will be opportunity for you to ask questions.
Yes.
We'll go into all about how you do that for those that haven't been with us before. But for now, we'll go to you, Aunty Munya, for an acknowledgement.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. So Nungaman Ladi Amba, Nungaman Ladi Uran, Nungaman Ladi Wadi Darawal Buru, Nungaman Ladi Amburani Buru. Hello, everybody. I said hello to you in my language, Badi. We say Nungaman Ladi, and we acknowledge the traditional owners where we're coming from today, who are the Wadi people of the Darawal Nation. And Nungaman Ladi Amburani Buru is acknowledging traditional owners right across the country. So welcome all. And
beautiful. There's some lovely hellos and greetings there in the chat too, Aunty Munya.
Yes.
So it's about half half today. So half of you, hello, lovely to meet you. First time we've met. Aunty Munya, we'll give a just really brief context for those people that haven't met before. Some of you that might be our accredited allies have probably seen more than enough of us, but it's good to see you've returned.
Yeah.
So we are the co-directors of Evolved Communities. Aunty Munya, tell us a little bit more about your country.
Well, this is little moi, growing up in the Kimberley region of Western Australia. My people are the Bardi people at the tip of the Dampier Peninsula there in blue, and we're saltwater people. So that's where I'm from.
And for me, Aunty Munya, and I'm just going to say, going back to that, could never tire of seeing that picture, Aunty Munya. It's very, very cute. For me, I'm not Indigenous, so one of my ancestors was on the First Fleet as a convict, and their son came down the Illawarra Escarpment and actually invaded the area where I live now. And so Wadi people of the Darawal Nation.
Yeah.
And Aunty Munya, as a white woman a young person growing up in America, I was just so confused about the lack of recognition of Aboriginal people, which got me going on this journey, which probably many of you might relate to.
Mm-hmm.
Aunty Munya, you just want to share a little bit about our books?
Yeah, these are our books, Practical Reconciliation, which is the basis of our allyship training, and Journey into Dreamtime, which I wrote just to explain Aboriginal spirituality, because we get asked a lot of questions about Dreamtime. So I thought I'll write a book for you, and there you go. And we met up in the Gulf country of Queensland, working with local communities there, and we discovered a shared passion for allyship. Excuse me, really.
And a big, audacious
big obsession.
To inspire 10 million more allies.
Absolutely.
And we're getting there, especially with people like you today. So while we are talking about the voice, and we're presenting different views to that, we are also presenting it through the lens of allyship. And Aunty Munya's reading.
Oh no, thank you, Melissa, for the comment on the Journey into Dreamtime. She loved the book. So
beautiful. Beautiful insight into such a rich culture. Aunty Munya's book, Journey into Dreamtime. Thank you for that.
I appreciate that. Yes.
Just a reminder that today is we're
Excuse me.
sitting in circle. We're all equal in this
Yes.
circle today. None of us have a choice about the circumstances that we're born into. So there's no guilt, no shame,
No.
no blame.
Safe space for
And
us.
oh, thanks. I was just getting a message in the chat.
What's that?
And you can ask any question that especially in this learning space today. Please ask us any question.
Yes.
We just ask that you put questions in the Q&A.
Yes.
Otherwise, because there's a lot going on in the chat as well. So we don't want to miss what you have to say.
That's why I'm trying to keep an eye on it.
And we love your reactions too. So seeing some thumbs up there. So fantastic.
Terrific.
Oh, I'm getting a bit hasty with the
you are
with the
jumping
mouse.
ahead there.
What's our big why today? Hopefully you also share this why for joining.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the voice and a question around the voice. Do you feel comfortable talking about it? And in terms of the referendum, have you made an informed decision on how to vote? Or do you feel like you've got enough information to make a decision that aligns with your values?
Yeah.
And that's our big why for today, is to increase your comfort.
Yep.
And talking about the voice, and to increase your confidence in your decision.
Yep.
A decision that aligns with your values and beliefs.
Yep.
Whichever way that decision might fall.
Mm-hmm.
Aunty Munya, I'm going to run another poll just to see, firstly, that question on comfort. So how you would describe your comfort now. So how comfortable are you talking about the voice?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
From very, mostly, moderately, uneasy, or terrified.
Terrified.
And we'll revisit this at the end of the session.
Yeah.
I'll just give a moment for that. Because it can be, it's like, they say, the old adage, not to talk about politics is one of the things. And unfortunately,
politics and religion, this
has become very political, unfortunately.
Yes.
So awesome. I'm going to close that poll. And I'll give it a bit longer. And then
that's good.
I'll also run another one, Aunty Munya, just to see your confidence as well.
Yeah.
While we're doing that, here's just a grab from today of just some of the news headlines
Top
that
stories.
You would have seen.
Yeah.
So like we say, this is a very, very much a moving feast.
Changes all the time, doesn't it, Carla?
Yeah. This one's interesting. Peter Dutton pledging to hold a second referendum. Johnny Farnham's voice.
Good on you, John.
We do play a version of that. We have been since we've been running these webinars. So it's so exciting to see it as part of the official one. And also, obviously, we had the big announcement of the October 14 date, Aunty Munya.
Yes.
So I'll end that poll now, and there's a quite a bit of a spread.
Only a little bit terrified. So.
only 1% terrified.
Wow.
So that is amazing.
That's good. Yeah.
Obviously, what our goal is to increase your comfort, and then I'm just going to run a quick one on your confidence in terms of making an informed decision. So while that's running, Aunty Munya,
yes,
there's three parts to our yarn today. We're going to talk about a little bit about the journey to the point where we are now with the voice. We're going to talk about the referendum, and then we'll get into the controversy, or the yes and the no sides, and also suggest some ways to have conversations in a way that might increase your comfort in having those. So let's get stuck into the first one, Aunty Munya, the voice. And please, a reminder to please, if you have a question or a comment that you'd like us to respond to, please pop it in the Q&A.
Yeah.
Uluru statement from the heart.
Yeah, some people are finding it very hurtful. Eddie's experiences. Some of his Indigenous friends are finding it process very hurtful, and it's very conflicting. Absolutely. And that's what we ask people to bear in mind, how it's affecting Indigenous people, in the workplace and friends as you move around. How can you support First Nations people through these difficult times, really?
So many of you are probably familiar with by now the Uluru Statement of the Heart, but
And I just want to answer Emma's comment too, that as a white woman, she's genuinely.
It's anonymous.
Oh, sorry, it's anonymous.
Sorry, it's okay. We'll keep going. So the Uluru Statement of the Heart, Aunty Munya, in 2017.
Yes.
250 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander delegates came together and endorsed the Statement of the Heart. And the Statement of the Heart has three components. And the first was voice. The next, sorry, Aunty Munya, if I'll let you talk to that.
Yeah, the treaty and then truth telling. It's a large part of that.
And truth telling was known as the Makarrata Commission. And it was proposed the voice as the first step. And I'm just bringing up some other information here, Aunty Munya. We've so it's between 2016 and 17, more than 1,200 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander representatives took part in 13 dialogues across the country. So it wasn't just this one meeting of 250 people.
Yeah.
At that time, they rejected a simple acknowledgement in the Constitution, which I think is what Peter Dutton's proposing if it doesn't get up. But they specifically proposed these things in this order: voice, treaty, and treaty and truth at the same time, but voice first. Right. There is a brilliant site that we used to use a lot before all other information became available, and that's From the Heart. And it had a short course, which is probably still very relevant. It's a 10-minute online course. If you're interested, you can go to that site and still do their course. And also at the same time, a lot more information has become available. But here is their official, and thank you, Liz. Liz did that course and found it very good.
Oh, right. That's great.
So if you're really starting at scratch to know more, I'd suggest go back and do that course. And here is the official video from that site, Aunty Munya.
I got a story to tell you. It's a good one. It's about how these people, the first people, got a voice.
60,000 years they've been speaking.
Had 363 languages.
But no voice. No say on matters which affected them. It wasn't right.
So, me and your granddad.
Me and your mum.
The whole nation did something about it. People called their friends and families. People talked about it on the streets, talked about it at work, on the field. Everybody made a song and dance about it.
Everyone walked side by side.
And that's how we changed this country for the better. How we made history.
Is that story true?
It could be.
Authorised by the Uluru Dialogue Sydney.
Wow, that's such a powerful advertisement, isn't it?
I've seen it
Carl?
so many times and I still get
I get quite
shivers.
moved. I do too.
And we'll get back to this. There are questions starting to appear. Some
That's
of the
good.
commentary in the chat, Aunty Munya, is
Yeah.
particularly around supporting Indigenous friends and colleagues.
Yeah.
So we will spend some time talking
Yep.
on that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So if you want, so the official information to find out more about the voice, this website was launched maybe like 6 weeks ago, a couple of months ago. It's the official government website with lots of resources, particularly there is the official Yes website. There's not an official No website as such. But this, I think what we've taken from this site is really important about the voice, and that's there's 8 design principles that will inform how the voice functions and its composition and so forth. They are:
The voice will give independent advice to the Parliament and government.
it'll be chosen by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Islander people based on the wishes of local communities.
It will be representative of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, gender balanced and include youth. The voice will be empowering, community-led, inclusive, respectful, and culturally informed.
It'll be accountable and transparent.
And it will work alongside existing organisations and traditional structures. The voice will not have a program delivery function.
And it doesn't, probably most importantly,
Yes.
and this has come up a lot in, I guess, in the arguments against, it does not have a veto power.
No.
It will not have a veto power.
Not at all.
So if you're concerned about how it's going to operate, these are the design principles that its operation will be based on.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
I think it's just they're fairly clear, they're simple, and they very much align with our Songlines path, evolved Songlines Pathways model of engagement, don't they?
Yeah,
and,
sure.
and the values that underpin it. Let's talk, so that's a little bit of context of where the voice came from. Let's talk about the referendum
itself. Yep.
Itself.
Yeah, so it's to enshrine a voice in the Constitution. So, you really, the Australian Constitution is a set of rules by which Australia is governed, and the only way you can change the Constitution is by holding a referendum. And it's up to Australian people to decide if the Constitution should change. Yes.
And that's an interesting one, Aunty Munya, because until this year, I didn't realise that the same-sex marriage was not
a referendum.
A referendum. It was a plebiscite, and it wasn't in the Constitution.
No.
But I guess I didn't really know much about all of this until.
Well, I mean, they are political processes that people need to be informed about. You know. So yeah.
So
can you make Kate a co-host? Yes.
Oh, okay. So we're having a team member has popped in, Aunty Munya.
Yes, to get in.
Kate, who will introduce while I'm making her a co-host. Could you please just talk about what a referendum actually is, Aunty Munya?
Well, it's a national vote on a question of change about the Constitution. It's very difficult to change the Constitution. It's not an easy process. There's a whole set of rules about even how a Constitution should be run and how it's to be won also. But you must be eligible to vote by and being on the voting register over 18, of course.
And you probably have heard, many of you would know how difficult it is to get a referendum through.
Yeah.
And you would have likely all heard in the...
only 8 of Australia's 44 referendums were a yes. And of course, the most successful Aboriginal one was the 1967 referendum, which was all about making sure that First Nations peoples could be counted in the Australian census, and for Parliament, the Commonwealth Parliament, to make Commonwealth laws for our peoples.
And we have Kate. Kate has come in. Kate, please feel free to introduce yourself.
There you go, Kate. There she is.
Thanks very much. Sorry about that. I'm a proud Palawa woman, which means I come from the little island down the bottom of Australia, Tasmania, or Lutruwita, as we call it. And I've joined the Evolve team recently, and very much enjoy being able to make us a kinder and more compassionate Australia. Thank you.
And lovely to have you here, Kate. And Kate will be fielding in the Q&A. We'll be responding to questions, and we'll also take some of those questions. We'll verbally respond to them as well. There is, and just a reminder, if you have a question, please pop it in the Q&A, because we could potentially miss it in the chat. So, Aunty Munya, when you were saying about how successful that referendum was, and I'll talk a little bit more later about the differences, I guess, between the complexity of debate in that 67 referendum to now. But if you look at those stats there from SBS, this was 1967, it was 91% yes.
Yes, it was the most successful referendum ever.
And you can see that's quite a lot more than the other 8 that were successful.
Yep.
So just I no, I'll talk a little bit. No, I'll come back to this as to the differences, I guess, between that. In that case, in that referendum, they did keep the question a lot simpler, and there wasn't at that time there wasn't a legislative requirement for the yes and no case, so there wasn't an official no case in that instance. The question,
to be put to people at the 2023 referendum will be a proposed law to alter the Constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Do you approve this proposed alteration? And it's simply yes or no.
so there's 4 parts of the constitutional amendment. Thanks, Jim. So recognition, and this is the constitutional amendment there, and so you can read it for yourself. So there's recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of Australia, a guarantee that there'll be a body to be called the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. So with that guarantee, with it being in the Constitution, it cannot be abolished, which we'll go into a little bit more. The purpose, it's to make representations to Parliament and the Executive on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So not on matters related to anything else. It's and matters related to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Detail, where does the Parliament shall, subject to this Constitution, have power to make laws with respect to matters relating to the voice, including its composition, functions, powers and procedures. So the Constitution is not a place for the detail, and again we can expand on that as well. What happens if it passes, Aunty Munya?
Well, there'll be a process with Indigenous peoples, First Nations peoples, to settle the voice design. And then, of course, legislation to establish the voice will go through the standard normal processes by the elected representatives in both houses of Parliament.
And a lot of you may be familiar with all of this, but I think it doesn't hurt to
take people through.
Again, why it's so difficult is you need a majority of voters and a majority in at least 4 states. So quite a number of referendums have had a majority of voters, but they've been scenario 3, they haven't had a majority in at least 4 states, and so they haven't passed. So it's a pretty big, I guess that's why we haven't had so many referendums, and particularly why we haven't had any successful. The controversy and our promise to touch on the arguments for and against. We're not going to go into great depth to answer your questions and to suggest a way of how we talk about the voice.
Just so I can see the chat. Thank you, Carla.
So we will definitely be getting to your questions as they come up. Diversity, Aunty Munya. Tell us more about, this map.
Well, this is the Indigenous map of Australia, excuse me, put out by the by ATSIC in Canberra. That wonderful patchwork quilt of colours represents a separate Indigenous nation, each with their own language, their own cultural protocols and customs. So just at a glance, you can automatically see just how diverse Indigenous Australia is.
And so those of you that have worked with us a bit before, you know, we actually spend a lot of time on this map. And we'll just ask you a question now. If you could please share in the chat, if you were to describe this map to somebody else, what are some of the words that come to mind? One of the most beautiful patchworks in the world.
It is
rich,
absolutely.
Confusing, colourful, intricate, complex, yet beautiful. Yes, and so when we're talking about diversity, over 500 different nations or countries on this map, we often ask people to think about, you know, if you were traveling to Europe and, you know, the protocols that would be in place. And imagine if we had that same mindset traveling anywhere on the coast of Australia for more than a couple of hours, you're likely to be traveling through a different country. So it's very diverse. And of course, viewpoints there'll be diversity in viewpoints about the voice in the referendum. So when we're having questions, and we'll talk more about this, you know, unpacking it, why do Aboriginal people not agree on the voice, we can just simply revert to this map. Aboriginal people are like any other people in the world.
There's a diverse range of opinions. Yeah.
So, Aunty Munya, you've probably, many of you, and we might just get a raise of hands if you have received your brochure in the mail, your yes and no pamphlet. My daughter used to call them pamphlets. I can't say it now. Okay, so not
quite a few.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe a quarter of you may have got those already. If not, you might have looked at it. As you would all know, and there's a question relating to this that we will respond to. With those brochures, they're not fact-checked at all. The AEC had to they had to be authorised by a majority of the members of Parliament, but the AEC had no role. Then they had to print them as they were. They had no role in fact-checking. So, of course, there would be there's confusion. So there's a really interesting article just on Sunday by Annabelle Crabb, Aunty Munya. And she was talking about a lot around why that confusion is coming about. And there are mixed messages in probably in the campaigns themselves. Like on one hand, we're saying the voice is for, you know, going in the Constitution and therefore it cannot be changed. And then on the other hand, we're saying that it's an advisory body only. And so therefore, you know, then the arguments come out about, well, what power does it have? So we can see why people could be confused. But I love what Annabelle Crabb says here. It doesn't matter if the Uluru Statement is 1 page or 1,000, the referendum is not inserting the Uluru Statement into the Constitution. It's about inserting 92 words, which we've read out. It's nothing to do with the date of Australia Day or charging people to go to the beach or proving that Australia isn't racist. Don't get lost in the weeds. And we had a comment by someone that they were concerned about, they were terrified about voting no, if that's how they felt they were voting, because they were accused of being concerned, worried about being accused of being racist. And I think this is one of the weeds that's got put in there. This is not changing anything about race or, you know, if you do vote no, it doesn't have a meaning that, you know, that you are racist. If you're voting no, if you do your homework and you have valid reasons for voting no.
Doesn't mean you're a racist.
And we just ask that people do the research and find, you know, what feels right in their
We
heart.
just ask you educate yourself. That's all about it. Yes.
So there's some questions I'll just go to now, Aunty Munya. How can the lies be counted? Is it worth fact-checking people or just leave the conversation? That's a really interesting question. I think we'll go to that when we talk about how to talk about it.
Yeah, okay.
As the model for the voice is not going to be defined in the Constitution, does this mean the model will be able to be changed in the future for better or worse? Yes, it does mean it could be changed. I mean, I think even in Annabelle Crabb's article, she said, I mean, this is being very, what's your word when someone's exaggerating something? Catastrophic, but she's saying, yeah, potentially a future government could change it, the composition. So I think she said it was one person in a remote community without internet access, giving an extreme example, but that is unlikely to happen. But the fact is that there has to be a voice is enshrined in the Constitution, and we'll show a video about that later.
Okay.
So the case is just a very very simple summary of the two cases, and we can talk to some of the fact checking around it. So there's a lot of really good resources available that have done the fact checking, Aunty Munya. But in terms of the main arguments of the no case are that it's legally risky, it's unknown, and there was a question about that. Is it unknown? Is there other examples? That it's permanent, it's divisive, and there's not enough detail. We'll talk a little bit more about the detail later. I think that there has been unanimous agreement amongst legal experts saying that it is constitutionally and legally sound, because particularly it doesn't have a veto power. It's just an advisory body. So in that sense, and the fact checking around, you know, if the High Court could have intervened and enforced things and so forth, they have found not to pass. That claim has found not to pass the fact checks. In terms of it being unknown, other countries do have First Nations approaches when it comes to consulting Parliament, and they all follow the international standards of the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, which we're party to as well. And relating to self-determination, participation in decision-making, and respect and protection of culture. But there's examples in New Zealand, Aunty Munya. There's examples in Scandinavian countries as well. Divisive. Permanent. Yes, it will be permanent in terms of there being an advisory body. And that's also an argument for it. So it depends which way you want to see it. And not enough detail we'll talk to in a moment. And the main arguments for the support for the yes has been, you know, recognition. Well, people say 65,000 plus years of continuous living culture, but Aunty Munya, we feel there's longer evidence than that, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely.
Just the power of listening and the power of listening and consulting with people is it leads to better decisions and better results. And a reason in favour is that it is permanent. And also those design principles that it will be representative of Indigenous people. Aunty Munya,
just go back. You haven't finished that. Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to go into the not enough detail in a moment.
No, but even divisive and not enough.
Yeah, we're going to go into those. In terms of some other things you might have heard, you know, about does this mean that sovereignty be affected? Aunty Munya?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, Dr. Hannah McGlade, who's a member of the UN Permanent Forum of the Indigenous Issues, says nowhere does the Voice to Parliament proposal suggest any agreement of Aboriginal people to cede sovereignty. To the contrary, the proposal recognises the right of Indigenous peoples to be heard on laws affecting our people. And a constitutional law expert and Deputy Vice-Chancellor of the University of New South Wales, George Williams, says the Voice referendum would say nothing about sovereignty and have no impact on sovereignty. They're like ships passing in the night.
So what about the detail?
Yeah.
Not enough detail. Well, firstly, the Australian Constitution, it's not the role of it to reflect details. And this is the kind of thing, like a lot of other laws, that it needs to some extent to be dynamic.
Yeah, and you just need to state the principle, and then you can have cases and other things fill in the rest of, the details on that. But there is, in a sense, some idea of what the details will look like. In this report, the Indigenous Voice describes the co-design process and gives you an idea of the likely detail that's going to go into the voice.
Yeah, and just some interesting facts about that.
I warn you, though, it's something like 200 pages long.
Yeah, it's
incredible reading. So
it is. And so here's some example of the why we say it is representative. So there's some of the inputs into that co-design report. So at Evolve, we have models for engagement. My background's actually in facilitation and co-design. From what I've seen from reading that report, Aunty Munya, it's a very comprehensive,
yes, it is,
co-design process. And here's an example. It's just from that report, but just a little diagram showing, how it would work, and just remembering those key design principles as well. We do have some questions, Aunty Munya, about representation and that kind of detail, like who appoints the body of advisors? Will it have representatives from all states and a diverse age range? There's ideas in this report about how that would work out, how that would happen. However, we have to revert back to those. The only thing that are definite is those design principles, and that is that it would be representative of all the states, and it would be representative in terms of age as well. And I'm just seeing if there was other questions around. Oh yes, Kate's responding to questions as well.
Oh, great.
So yep. Thank you so much, Kate. How is it different to other advisory bodies, Aunty Munya?
Well, the main difference is that it's enshrined in the Constitution, which means it can't be taken away. They can amend how it works as long as the voice of First Nations peoples remains in place in some form. So it's different from, ATSIC and all the forerunning bodies beforehand, in that they could be just removed at the change of government and at any government's sort of actions, really. And yeah.
So, Aunty Munya, I think you might have shared this next video with me, but also my 16-year-old daughter said, "Oh, Mum, you've got to watch this video."
I know, it's fantastic.
Everyone's watching it at school. She said it's the clearest explanation I've had of the voice. So do we have a name? I meant to have a name up there, and I haven't, sorry. She's on, this is from TikTok.
Yeah.
And anyway, it's a really simple explanation.
She just took it upon herself to do this, and it's great.
So why are First Nations peoples so insistent that the voice needs to be enshrined in the Constitution? Quick history lesson. Back in 1973, Gough Whitlam established the National Aboriginal Consultative Committee until Malcolm Fraser got rid of that. And he replaced it with the National Aboriginal Conference until Bob Hawke got rid of that. And then there was nothing. And then Bob Hawke set up the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission until... So why are First Nations peoples so insistent that the voice needs to be enshrined in the Constitution? Quick history lesson. Back in 1973, Gough Whitlam established the National Aboriginal Consultative Committee until Malcolm Fraser got rid of that. And he replaced it with the National Aboriginal Conference until Bob Hawke got rid of that. And then there was nothing. And then Bob Hawke set up the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission until John Howard got rid of that. And then there was nothing. And then in 2011, the National Congress of Australia's First Peoples met for the first time until that was defunded and then finally gotten rid of by the Morrison government. In 2017, the Uluru Statement from the Heart was released. This took years of consultation and conversation amongst First Nations peoples, and in it they asked for a voice to be enshrined in the Constitution. Why? Because, unlike all those other laws, the Constitution can't be changed by the government. This can only be changed by a referendum. That's a vote of all Australians. So, what are we being asked to vote on in the upcoming referendum? Well, we're being asked to vote on whether to include the concept of a voice to Parliament in the Constitution. So a body to provide advice to the government on issues relating to First Nations peoples from the perspective of First Nations peoples. That's it. From there, how the voice works, so the functions and powers and composition and procedures, well, that will go into law, right? So those things can be changed along the way. But what can't be changed is the Constitution. And that means there will always have to be a voice. While it can change, it can't be taken away.
Plain and
clear,
simple, isn't it?
Yes. So yes, and maybe in the chat, if one of the team could, it's Will. Will Strachey. Thank you so much, Maria.
Thank
She's
you.
already done.
Yeah.
Will Strachey on, yes, and the team will include it in the follow-up resources as well.
Yeah. She's
fabulous.
pronounced
Veal. Thank you. Would voice Parliament as an additional third chamber, Aunty Munya?
No, definitely not. But that's what is being promoted, isn't it? So no third chamber at all. No.
And then, you know, there's questions about the level of support, and this probably is the thing that most allies have come to me about, saying, I want to do the right thing. I want to do what most Aboriginal people are in favour of. And there's been all sorts of statistics sort of bandied about, and you probably all would have heard the statistic about, more than 80% of Aboriginal people are supportive of the voice. So ABC have a great fact checked on that one. So Anthony Albanese says surveys show between 80 and 90% of Indigenous Australians support the voice. Is that correct? Largely, they said they looked through three different three different main polls, Aunty Munya, and they said when all the errors of margin were taken into account, the time that these surveys have been done, how long ago they were done, then statistically it still does stack up when you look at representation, survey sample size. And one thing they did say that that YouGov poll was done, and they said it's the best available measure to suggest each person agreed, or each poll agreed, that there's no scientific evidence to suggest anything other than broad support among First Nations Australians. So if you're really concerned about it, have a look at that article. I think it's like 6 pages long, but it goes into detail on each of those surveys. But I think that's where I sort of, I guess, hang my hat, Aunty Munya, was that if anything, they're definitely showing broad support. And and they did say in that article, there was a quote saying, if there was anything to the contrary, it would have definitely been hitting the media pretty hard if there was evidence showing that lack of support. Otherwise, there's the Reconciliation Australia. They do a reconciliation barometer every 2 years. And they also found a similar statistic in terms of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. They believe that
86%.
Yeah, that it I'm just going to say, oh, sorry. Yeah, the figures were 86 believed that it was important, a national representative Indigenous body, and 87% felt that it should be protected under the Constitution.
Yeah, it's pretty high, isn't it?
Just checking the open questions. How do we... So could we give some examples of what representations the voice might make to Parliament? Essentially, it's anything that might affect the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So it is a big thing. But
I imagine a lot of it's got to do with closing the gap, Carla. Yeah,
mostly to do with closing the gap.
The fact that there are still those awful statistics that most of us are familiar with now. Aboriginal people having a lower life expectancy, higher suicide rates, lower education, etc. Those sorts of things, I imagine, would be what our people would be looking to create change in, to closing those gaps, closing those, the targets.
Yeah. And with our engagement models, all our engagement work similar to the Statement of the Heart and the Voice, even in a non-Indigenous context, that our work, policies or outcomes that have had input by people affected by the actual policy or the decision, where they've been involved in the design of the solution, have so much more success.
Indeed.
So, yeah, as Aunty Munya said, all things like health outcomes, housing, types of housing, anything like that. So the pointy bit, how do we talk about the voice, Aunty Munya? And we'd love to see if there's any questions. We did see that, you know, there were varying levels of comfort, not as so many people really comfortable, but I guess from our perspective, we call it a hard yarn, don't we, Aunty Munya?
It is a hard yarn.
We call talking about racism a hard yarn. We call talking about privilege a hard yarn.
Yes.
We, as in at Evolve, we call talking about truth-telling a hard yarn. And our dream is that these hard yarns
will become easy in the future.
Easier.
Yep.
Our approach that we've developed for that is pretty straightforward. It's the 3 steps.
Yep. R3 cultural approach, which is to reflect, relate, and reconcile when you're faced with a challenging issue or topic. Pause, look at what's at the heart of the issue, what led to this situation, and then relate. Try to imagine how the other person might be feeling. So put yourself in their shoes and then reconcile together, work out a solution and way to move forward together. That's our little R3 model that we offer at Evolve.
So I want to give you, and please share in the Q&A if you would like to run a conversation through that for us too. But going back to this is feedback too. I've going to use 2 examples to start with, Aunty Munya.
Yep.
And this was feedback after a webinar, and they said, oh, we wanted to understand more why Aboriginal people have different views on the voice. Now, my first thought was, oh my gosh, that was like a third of the webinar was looking at the map of Aboriginal Australia and explaining that Aboriginal First Nations people are as diverse as any people. But I thought, no, walk your talk, Carla, reflect. So what's the issue here? That person has a different understanding than I have, Aunty Munya, on First Nations people's diversity. Relate, try to imagine how they might be feeling. Well, they were giving me their genuine feedback, which I'd invited. So I didn't want to do anything that was going to shut the conversation down or lead to them feeling shame or blame, or for me acting like I knew more than they did or was better than they are. So reconcile, so work with the other person towards a solution. How can we move forward together? So what I did in that case was I said, and what I have done in other cases where people have said similar things to me is gone back and had a conversation around the map of Australia. And I've said, oh, look, I heard you say, you know, why you still don't understand why Aboriginal, or you don't understand why Aboriginal people have different views. You thought that they would be in agreement on this. Bearing in mind that caveat that the majority do support the voice. And they'd say, yes, that's right, I did say that. And I'd say, oh, do you remember we had a look at the map, or have you seen the map before? And then I'd actually bring the map up. If I had my phone, I'd try and bring it up on the computer and just have a discussion about the map and about how diverse Aboriginal Australia is, and then say, so this is why I think, you know, in my experience, I can see, you know, that there is a range of viewpoints and you know, but I can remember at one time, particularly when I was in my schooling in 70s and 80s, thinking that Aboriginal people would have all thought the same and acted similar, because that's what I was taught. So that's an example of how you might have it with that conversation. And to go to someone's question, how can the lies be counted? Is it worth fact-checking people or just leave the conversation? In response to that, I'd say, have a go at applying the 3 R's to that scenario. So I heard you say that the voice is going to be just another chamber of Parliament. Did I get that right? I've got a different understanding. Would you be interested in hearing my understanding? If they say no, I'd leave it. If they say yes, then I'd just share like I might say, look, I was a bit worried about that too, but I've done a bit of reading and this is what I've been told or what I've heard at this webinar or whatever the case might be. Another bit of feedback that we had to step through this in my own mind, Aunty Munya, was earlier on when we were first doing these, a feedback from, actually it was from the same person, was that the webinar spent more time on the yes case than the no case. And I thought, oh, gee, so my first response was, oh, that's really interesting, because it actually didn't. But reflect, relate, so that's their experience. So relate, again, I didn't want to say anything that shut down the conversation. I wanted to approach it with curiosity. So in reconciling, I sort of unpacked with them more, you know, why they felt that way. And then I realized, I know now what it might have been, was at that time,
there wasn't a lot.
There wasn't a lot from the no, and there probably still isn't, but I do remember showing that yes video that we all showed you today, and there wasn't a similar no
That's
one.
right, there wasn't,
so I can see where it led to that perception. But I also did speak to the fact that we didn't spend, they said, oh, we thought you'd spend more time on why Aboriginal people, their no arguments. And in that case, I'm like, well, the reason we didn't is we didn't spend as much time on that is the majority of the information at that time then was saying that most Aboriginal people were supportive of the voice. We're going to have a look at some more questions here, Aunty Munya. So if the government can modify the design of the voice, how is this different to previous, when governments cancelled similar functions before? No, this is, it appears a similar function has always been around, although continually changing. The fact that there is a voice and those design principles in the Constitution, or the voice will be in the Constitution, not the design principles, that is remarkably different to anything before, and pretty much typified by that video that we showed from TikTok. If this is a starting point, Aunty Munya, what might be next to better support and represent First Nations peoples? I'd say the rollout of the voice, and then going on to truth telling and continuing on with truth telling and
with
treaty.
all of the other conversations. Definitely. That still need to happen.
Okay, so we have this article, this will come out in your resources for the Human Resource Institute website, about how to facilitate helpful conversations about the voice, summarising some of the things we've talked to today. Terrific. This is still a great handbook, Aunty Munya. You've got yours there. Please raise your hands if you have got that book at home. It's small. It's very affordable,
but great.
It also goes into the arguments, and there's quite a few people that have that book at home too. Aunty Munya, awesome.
Just answering the questions and that's great.
Okay, so the thing we love about it, we said, is it does. So for us, Aunty Munya, let's go to you. How do you feel about the voice?
Oh, look, Carla, for me, it's a start. You've got to start somewhere. I look at what we've got now, and the fact is we've got a gap in all of those areas that impact on the lives of Indigenous peoples. Still there, nothing much being done about that. Certainly the gap's not closing. Here is a proposal to just try another way to close the gap. And so for me, it's important to at least give it a shot. And again, if it doesn't work out, you go back to the drawing board and you try and come up with other solutions. But this, for me, is something positive, and more so because it will be enshrined in the Constitution and not easily removed, like the old AT6 and NAC and so forth, all those other bodies beforehand. But it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. And for me as an ally, the most important thing I want to do is listening. We say, you know, these things on the side of our heads are the most important things in our Songlines Pathways engagement model and in allyship. And so I feel for myself, I've done enough research to feel that, as I said, the majority of Indigenous people are supportive, and that it's also the other value that we hold at Evolve is placing people affected by decisions.
That just makes me smile already, just seeing that image. Wow.
Yeah. Just a comment about that the no vote does not seem to get anywhere near as much coverage. From my research and so forth on Google, I think I haven't found an equivalent to the Yes campaigns organisations and it's as a consolidated point of reference. I haven't found similar as to the no. I just like this little cartoon before we're getting towards the end, Aunty Munya. Please, if you have any more questions that we haven't answered today, we will take them to Ask Aunty or Ask an Ally. A question here, Aunty Munya, is there a summary of the perceived risk, what might be lost by voting yes or no? I haven't seen a summary.
No, I haven't
seen a summary, but that's a really good suggestion.
And that's good if somebody came up with a little sort of info chart or something. Yeah.
So allies today, if any of these ideas inspire you, allyship is a verb. It's all about taking action. So if the resource is not out there, you might want to see what you can do to fill that gap.
Yeah.
Lots of ways to develop your confidence as an ally. Online, please jump online for our free resources. There's the online privilege walk. There's free online ally training in a webinar, and there's our Closing the Gap report. And you can show up year round as an ally.
Exactly.
Our team, particularly Marine, our team has put together these beautiful upcoming webinars. In November, how to acknowledge country authentically. In January, what's the problem with January the 26th? And this is all through the lens of allyship. March is around closing the privilege gap. May, National Reconciliation Week, and July, NAIDOC Week. So, and this month, if you sign up this month, not steak knives, Aunty Munya, but our books will be sent to you, Dreamtime and Practical Reconciliation. So in our closing yarning circle, there's a couple of, a few questions, only one or two questions that we didn't get to, but we will take to Ask Aunty and do a video response to those. We'd love to hear, I'm going to run the polls again, Aunty Munya, just to see how you're going. And while we do that, we say take care of each other.
In Yirigalwana.
And Big Eso.
Big Eso.
And I do have both versions of the official campaign and Mitch Tambo singing the voice. Aunty Munya, we're going to go back to the Mitch Tambo one.
Yeah, but are you going to do the poll first?
And I'll do the polls while I'm sharing those. And any closing words in our yarning circle, we'd love to hear in the chat as well. But I'll set this one going, Aunty Munya, while I run the polls.
Okay.
You're the voice, you are the voice. Try and understand it. That's all we're asking. Try and understand it and use your voice.
You're the voice.
You're the voice. You're the voice, everyone. Thank you.